During the recording of this episode, I had some audio problems and I cut in and out for a bit. In order to make this flow a lot better, we've re-recorded a couple of the questions that I asked Talesh. We didn't want to remove any of what Talesh said because he had lots of great stuff to say. We hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the We Hack Purple podcast, where each week we meet a new member of the information security industry and find out about their super interesting jobs. As you know, I am Tanya Janca, your host, also known as She Hacks Purple, and I am from We Hack Purple, a learning academy, community, podcast, and way more. This week we're going to talk to Talesh Seeparsan, and we're going to talk about the security of e-commerce. And I don't know about you, but I really like buying stuff on the internet, so I'm pretty excited to talk to Talesh. But instead of me telling you about him, actually first, we are sponsored by ThreadFix, and I want to say a big shout out and thank you to them because they just announced they want to sponsor us all the way until we've run out of guests. So thank you very, very much. But with that, let's talk to Talesh and let's learn about how we can secure our e-commerce. So Talesh, welcome.
Thank you, Tanya. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming on the show. I follow you on Twitter, so I was excited when you said yes.
Thanks. It's my honor to be here.
Awesome. So could you briefly tell us basically like what e-commerce is and then kind of why we need to secure it?
I mean, e-commerce. Now, how could I explain this? How do I explain the concept of shopping online? As you can imagine, in the last 12 months, e-commerce has probably taken off dramatically around the world.
Oh yeah.
And shopping online has become a fixture of our day-to-day lives. Mm-hmm. And my personal history with it is that I've started working with e-commerce. Wow, we're looking at approximately 15 years ago. And like yourself, I've started this journey as a working in development and building e-commerce stores, and as a budding PHP developer back then, it was a great space to be in. And I know I'm saying the word PHP just from the get-go.
And this is a security podcast.
But before anyone starts tuning away, PHP has grown up a lot. PHP has grown up a significant amount since you've heard about the crazy PHP hacks. So there is a lot that's been done in the last decade or so for PHP and securing PHP stores. And I started 15 years ago as a PHP developer, but I'd say around 6-7 years ago, the attackers started paying a little bit closer attention to our e-commerce frameworks and the ability to get credit cards from e-commerce sites as opposed to skimming cards from, say, a gas station or an ATM. And the explosion in attacks against e-commerce sites has kind of made me realize that, we need to start spending more time and effort building more secure e-commerce. And that's basically what I've been focused on for the last 6-7 years, helping developers build e-commerce stores a little bit, taking security and building defensively from early on in the process. And unlike most of the InfoSec industry, there is one thing that attackers want when it comes to e-commerce is credit cards. Slight anecdote. Once we had attackers try to run ransomware on our merchants' servers, but that lasted just a few weeks because they learned very quickly that merchants have excellent backups.
Oh, yeah.
Merchants do not want their sites to go down in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. So that was the only time I've dealt with attackers on e-commerce systems not hunting credit cards, and credit cards is the gold that everyone's after when we talk about securing e-commerce sites. So it's a little bit different from protecting networks or protecting big enterprise systems where attackers may be searching for information or, trying to steal identities and this sort of stuff. The goal is the credit cards. So that kind of gives you like a big picture of how e-commerce security goes. It's very focused.
So how did you get from being a PHP developer working? So first of all, I guess, okay, I want to know first how you got into e-commerce, and then I would love to know how you got from being an e-commerce dev into being an e-commerce security person. So a two-part question.
Okay. Because, and it kind of, we might end up talking a little bit about security businesses later, but when it comes to business, I found that the clients for my, contracting, my solo development contracting business was more happy to pay when they're e-commerce clients and they wanted something built. So I've realized that this field worked well for me.
I like money too. I really like it when I do work and then they pay me. Turns out not everyone wants to do that.
Yes. So I mean, like, I wish I had something better to say it, but it was just financially driven. I had reliable clients that paid on time, and so that got me from PHP into e-commerce. And luckily for me, at the time when I started, there was actually, my plate's still here. There was a PHP e-commerce framework called Magento, and they were just taking off when I made that transition. I used to be a Flash developer also, if you want all the bad things I've done.
Oh my gosh, have you also robbed banks and kicked puppies? Just for Talesh.
I've worked for an online casino also. So no, you're getting all my secrets. So yeah, I mean, I went from the Flash PHP thing in the early 2000s to just PHP e-commerce, and luckily for me, I got in very early into the Magento world, which is a PHP framework that just focuses on e-commerce. Luckily, they were popular enough that they were at one point in time owned by Adobe, eventually owned by private equity firms, and now they're part of Adobe. Sorry, they were owned by eBay, then private equity, and now they're part of Adobe. So technically, I work with Adobe e-commerce software.
Okay.
And that's how I went from being a PHP developer to getting into a community of open source developers building great stuff. Cool. And after a few years, I've realized that the interests I've had in security as a teenager, we're not going to talk about my indiscretions as a teenager when it comes to security, could be translated to securing e-commerce stores. I saw a need for it. I saw a problem that needed fixing. Mm-hmm. And because I was part of an online community, an open source community, a very welcoming community, I decided to make this jump and start sharing what I know. Because when it comes to open source, there's this sense of giving back to your community. And the biggest driver for me was I've learned so much from this community. When I couldn't figure something out in PHP, they'd help me. And I've progressed significantly in my own career because of the help from others. And I saw this gap there that we have attackers breaking into stores, and we have not enough education around how to build defensively. So I took it upon myself to share what I know and spend more time researching. And people ask me, how did I learn all this stuff from the internet? I just spend as much time on the internet reading, learning, following, people in the InfoSec community like yourself, and then distilling all those little parts of it into what applies to e-commerce. And I think that's how I made that move from just being an e-commerce developer to someone who now does more audits and that the security side of e-commerce. And it was very driven by giving back to my community because they had a need and I had the skills to provide it. So
Cool. So I have to do a certain amount of marketing. And so have you
okay.
seen my book yet, Alice and Bob Learn Application Security?
I have seen it.
I
I
have
need
to
to get a
mention,
copy of that.
you should get a copy of it. I'm very biased, but I think it's great. Also, my mom said it was good.
All right.
That's important. She
My
just
mom
read,
might.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
your mom might like it.
I think my mom might be looking at this live stream, so
Hi, Talesh's mom.
hi, mom.
Hi. Isn't that the best though? Like when your family supports your career, it's awesome.
I know, and they have been fairly disconnected from everything I do because I usually speak at conferences and I do work on site and nobody really knows what I do. I think
Well,
this is one of the few times I'm just like, talking about it on YouTube.
I
So,
I have a feeling that they think that you probably like wear a ninja suit and do backflips and stuff and maybe have like swords. Obviously there's like a hoodie at some point where you're this, you're like
no, no.
it's like why does Talesh turn the lights off when he works and insist on wearing only black hoodies? It's like no reason. No reason.
No, yeah, we need to get a little bit more color in here, right? Maybe
Yeah.
maybe the Alice and Bob book would fit right in with my
Oh,
dark color scheme in my bookshelf.
well, it's
I'm gonna have to get a
purple.
copy.
That's so good. We
Yeah,
also, okay,
yeah.
so I know I'm wearing swag. So I'm wearing black, but it's because we didn't have this color or like this size because I'm a woman and not a man. So I'm smaller size. So then I could
Right,
not get to, basically it's only extra large unisex, which means men's sizes that came in purple.
right.
So we now though have bright pink, bright green, and bright purple, but in lady sizes, and so now the men are like, "Hey, I'm not an extra large sized man. I'm like a medium sized man. Why don't I get a purple?" So I have to do something with our swag shop, and so I apologize to everyone who's upset about the. That's why Talesh is wearing gray because he's like protesting the fact that he can't get purple. I'm wearing gray too.
So, so what you're saying is now you have men and women's swag.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. So we had women's
That's
t-shirts and cute
yeah,
like girl we have little girl shirts and little boy shirts,
yeah,
but now we
right,
have a lady shaped hoodie. So it kind of goes in a bit,
right,
kind of goes out a bit, and it has way
right.
more bright colors and stereotypically femme colors, but I totally know dudes that wear pink and they don't care.
I almost wore a pink shirt to this, but
Pink
thank you so
rules.
much for having men and women's swag because
Oh
here's
yeah.
the thing. Everyone talks about, you should have women's swag. When you get women's swag, the men's cut also fits better to men.
Oh
Like
yeah.
unisex doesn't fit anyone.
No,
So,
no, unisex is like, let's
so
take
yeah,
the worst of both and then just
yeah,
mash it together so that no one is
yeah,
satisfied. That's equality.
yeah. No, props to you for having, quality swag.
Oh, thank you. I am wearing a Canadian e-commerce company shirt. Do you recognize this? It's the
Ah,
Shopify shirt. Get shit done.
ah.
This is the Shopify shirt because I'm from Ottawa
Yeah.
where Shopify started.
It's so funny because when Shopify was beginning its meteoric rise, there was a lot of people in my community who saw it as a challenge, and there was a little bit of like the other when it comes to talking about Shopify, and it was a little bit funny because I was one of the few people in the community based out of back then I lived in Toronto, and I was one of the few Canadians, and there was this expectation that I'd be more involved in Shopify, but I mean,
Because you're Canadian,
I
you would
had
just know them because there's only 10 of us that live
yeah.
here.
Yeah. I mean, mind you, now I have lots of good friends who work for Shopify, but
Yeah, me
the
too.
thing is, like, Shopify has this amazing advantage when it comes to securing e-commerce that I'm on record of being incredibly jealous of. 5, 6 years ago, before HTTPS was a thing, when everybody had a public key certificate, I was trying my best to push all stores to just put the entire site under HTTPS, and it was a little bit of an uphill battle. And in the midst of me trying to educate everyone of the advantage of this, Shopify just switched on HTTPS for the entire
Oh yeah.
ecosystem. And I was so jealous. I was like, it was so easy because they're a software as a service. They could just switch on security for everybody.
Yeah.
And here am I just trying to convince individual stores to just switch on.
Yes. And they set a standard for the industry then too, right? Because if Shopify is offering that as a default and then other stores aren't, it's like, well, maybe I'm not
Yeah.
going to shop here.
Yeah. So if you're getting a certificate for free, and this is something that used to cost untold amounts of money. Well, okay, not untold,
yeah.
but like I
I'm
see
paying
this untold.
$90 a month for our cert through our, even though they're free certs from Let's Encrypt, I'm just like, the level
Yeah,
of effort for me to go and do it and set it up myself, I'm just like, I'll just pay.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't
But
want
the
to
thing
rotate
is,
keys.
when yeah, well, when you think about it, and when it boils down to everything, you're basically paying for someone to do math.
Yeah.
You're just paying for some numbers,
Yep.
and
Yep. I'm
and this
willing
is
to
why I
pay.
call it untold money because, if you're a cert, you're just printing money because you're just making numbers up on a server and just like getting paid for it, which is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous ecosystem.
You mean a certificate
So
authority, like a company that issues certs? Oh yeah.
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
they just like do a little bit of calculations and get paid for it. So and it's not like a significant amount of calculations that it's going to chew into your electricity bill.
So
So
they are supposed to be assuring that they're not handing out certs to super shady places, but a bunch of them have been doing that anyway. And so now the security industry is fighting back. And so with security headers, there's a new one called expect-CT. And so
mhm,
lots of places are going to start using it. And what that means is they're going to check up on certificate authorities. And they're going to say,
yeah,
sorry, you've issued too many crappy ones. You're not a real authority anymore. And we're not going to
right.
allow certs from you. And so, yeah, I think that the time is going to catch that some certificate authorities are going to have to keep working as hard as the ones like Shopify and other more reputable ones are.
Yeah. I mean, we don't want to get into the stories of like DigiNota and those guys who just got, caught printing certificates for companies they shouldn't have. Um, but
Yeah.
speaking of like certificates and getting getting that like set up and the new advancements in public key infrastructure to put a label around it. One thing I've found is working in e-commerce, the difficult the difficulty is, and I assume this is something that's across most infosec fields, the difficulty is getting the clients on board. They just refuse to spend money on anything that doesn't increase their bottom line.
Yeah.
And having a more secure certificate or changing the way you handle certificates is just not something you could achieve easily.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things that I've struggled with, and it's something I've the more time I spend in the infosec community, I've realized that everyone has their own version of this in each industry, you know. Um, and a couple of your podcasts I've looked at, I'm like, those are some really good tips I could use to get buy-in
Yeah.
on getting more security.
Part of our program at We Hack Purple, we actually have like several lessons on getting buy-in. And then we have
Yeah.
a lesson on advocacy, like a whole module about like how to try to change your culture for the better. And then we have
Yes.
another entire module about how to give really good presentations so you don't bore everyone to tears so people actually listen to you. Because
Oh
I was
wow.
like, I'm really good at this stuff, so let's just put everything in there, and they could skip this one if they're like, I'm already a perfect presenter. It's fine.
But don't you think that there is a lot of security? There's a lot to security in just communicating that, and,
Yes.
and just and being
Yes.
that person,
Building.
as opposed to the numbers and the tech. Like, all the numbers in tech are very important. Yes, don't get me wrong. But there's a lot to being successful in the InfoSec community, or not in industry, and just being that person who would be able to say, look, I am going to take a stand on this because, it's not PCI compliant. Let's just pull something from my industry. It's not
Yeah.
PCI compliant. And being able to communicate that well enough that the danger and the risk is actually grasped by, executives who think, we're spending money that doesn't affect our bottom line, right?
Yes.
Do you have a course on risk and
Yeah.
evaluating risk?
So we have
And
a module about how to create an in-house risk score for your
right,
applications and like what to base it on and which types of metrics you want to gather so that you know what types of risk you're looking at. But it's not like when I've worked with risk analysts and how they fill
Mhm.
out a lot of paperwork and stuff like that. It's more like, I have 20 different tools and one's high and low and one's CVE score this and the other one's,
Right.
apples and oranges and this and that. And so like, how can you see them all, like compare them equally? But also then, what if your business has special needs? And quite frankly, most of them do. Like for instance, my
Yeah.
business, we sell courses and train people and have a community. None of our stuff's top secret. Like as long as people aren't getting the personal details of our
Hmm.
customers or anyone's credit cards, like we're good. And so I just don't
Right.
entrust myself to those. And I make a third
Yeah.
party. So like I use Stripe and I use
Yeah.
Shopify. And they
Yeah.
do the heavy lifting for me and it's awesome.
Right. Right. And it's amazing for that. And a lot of times I get small businesses who want to get onto e-commerce and they want something secure. I just direct them to Stripe, Shopify. There are other players in the similar space like BigCommerce, but they're getting into bigger e-commerce, enterprise e-commerce, where
Yeah.
you're looking for strategies to increase sales by small percentage points. And, when you don't have big wins, when it comes to strategy, then my problem and where my work in the e-commerce industry comes in is then merchants start introducing added functionality, a little bit of email marketing, a little bit of, advanced shipping stuff, and, all these bits and pieces they start putting it into the e-commerce framework adds complexity. So whereas Adobe/Magento will do an excellent job of building a secure framework, once you start plugging bits and pieces into that framework, you're introducing, vectors of
Risk.
attack.
Yeah.
And especially if you need something custom done. So, fields like, veterinary medicine where, you're selling restricted chemicals or
Oh,
drugs.
yeah.
You need to build custom functionality to that. There's no third party saying, hey, you know what? Here's something that's specifically geared towards selling veterinary drugs, all right?
Yeah.
So now you have developers building custom functionality and you have third party, modules you're plugging into e-commerce. You're just dramatically increasing your surface for attack. And that's where the crux of the work I do is when I go to conferences and I speak to developers, is just getting them into a pattern of, planning this better. It's like, how do you approach adding functionality to e-commerce so it doesn't increase your risk, it doesn't increase your liability? And it's it's been something I absolutely enjoyed because one, I'm a little bit of an extrovert and I love speaking with people. So, thank you for this opportunity. um, but also I have, I've spent so much time learning it that I had to, I have this internal need to just share what I've known because I don't want to see my community fail at doing things that I know they could do better. And the hard part is a lot of times is I need to tell people you need to be that person in your organization. You need to be the one who's advocating security, the actual tech, the VPNs that you need and the encryption and all that stuff, that could be figured out. You could work on the hard problems later, but
Yeah.
first you need to be the one security advocate within your company.
Yeah.
before any change can happen.
Yes. So you're speaking my language. This is, for people that are listening, I was just furiously nodding along to him.
So yeah, I mean, that's why, when you said that, you're an advocate for also like you have such a great way of putting it, shifting
Security
security
left.
to the left.
Yeah,
Yeah,
earlier in
yes,
the system development
yeah,
life cycle. Well,
yeah.
we want to be
So I
there at the
mean,
beginning, me and Talesh, helping you secure your apps.
yeah, yeah, and the companies that I have seen do it, they have done it well, and well, not their personal, but their company's risk on the internet, because they've belonged to industries that may be a little bit more targeted by attackers for credit cards, drove them to prioritize security when it comes to add-in functionality, and it's paid off well for them. They've gone from being the victims to being leaders in the space, where sometimes now I turn to them asking, have you guys seen recently, X or Y happening? Speaking of which, like, what I also do, apart from like the education and advocacy of doing things more securely, I also do security audits on e-commerce stores.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I've got a little bit of a two-sided approach to security and e-commerce. So a lot of the stores that I work audits on, and I help them, I help build a better secure development practice within the organizations. I try to maintain relationships with them, because one important part of e-commerce security is threat detection and emerging threats coming up, because most of the times we go from widespread attacks trying to attack as many stores as possible, to some stores and some industries where I don't know how to put this where regulation may be a little bit lighter. Attackers seem to favor breaking into those stores, and they see significantly higher, levels of attacks, significantly more complicated attacks, and it's important to have this sort of connection with other merchants, so we could compare notes. Maybe something, if you're in the infosec industry and you're deep in on, unlike me, I've heard of something called an ISAC, information sharing. So there's a infosec organization, and I know there's a retailers one and there's a hospitality one, where within an industry they share threat information.
Oh, that's wise.
Yeah, and I know it was something that was advocated by the Obama administration back, that would be, at least like 6-7 years ago. And I'm trying to find more information of how these work. And if it's possible for me to start advocating within e-commerce, we have something set up. So the hosts, the merchants, the big agencies who are building these stores, we have some sort of framework for sharing information. So when threats arise, we as a community could respond faster. Because right now we have, a new threat arise. Like this morning I tweeted out something. There was a new mage card attack. So mage card is kind of what I deal with a lot. So there was a new mage card attack detected by somebody at Kaspersky. If I was not paying attention to Twitter instead of doing my work,
you could have missed it.
I could have missed it, right? And now this is something I want to reach out to my other contacts within hosting and my other merchants that I work with to say, hey, have you seen anything like this in your logs? But I personally believe that's an unfeasible or untenable way to approach it. And I'm looking, and maybe this is how I could get a little bit of help from your podcast. I'm looking for help in forming some sort of organization and setting rules for not sharing, probably damaging information, but sharing enough information so members could all benefit from a shared detection level across the industry. Because I think it's the next step. We've done a fairly good job in e-commerce of, blocking attackers, and responding to threats quickly, but we're not taking that next step in going after, industry-wide sharing.
When you speak at conferences and share information and content with the community, what do you talk about?
Specifically, I spend most of because I'm a small business owner and I'm my own boss and, consultant. Specifically, I'll speak about the security audit side of my business. The important part is you're delivering value to the merchants. So mostly I work with merchants who may have had a hack or may be concerned, or maybe, part of a larger conglomerate and one part of their business has had a hack and they have some sort of concern. So getting into this, you need to understand that if you're working with merchants, you're working with stores, the important thing is that you deliver them value as opposed to a lot of technical mumbo jumbo. And I'm sorry if I'm, losing you viewers because I'm calling technical stuff technical mumbo jumbo. But the thing is, at the end of the day, and it's my belief that if your merchants don't have, say, something that's actionable, then as much advice as you give them, it's never going to happen. It's never gonna make any sort of positive impact on their business. So I mean, like it sounds simple, but I've done audits where I say, look, you know what, and this is when I first started. I'm like, look, you know what, you need to stop handwriting SQL code. There is ways to get data and put data into a database, which is highly secure compared to just writing select star from blah blah blah. And this is where my background as a developer comes in handily, because I could get right into the code that they've probably introduced a vulnerability and coach them into better ways of doing so. So and this is probably giving away part of my business secret, but what I do is if I have a client that needs an audit, I don't toss a PDF over the wall with all the vulnerabilities in the system and all the things that need to change. I specifically request Jira access. I'm like, I need you to make me account in your Jira system and make me, yeah, that's what I do. I'm like, I want a QA role in your Jira. And then I log in and I'm like, make an epic. And just the last client I had, they made an epic and they call it Talesh security fixes. And I was like, okay, that works. And I created all the stories and all the tasks that required to be done. And I think that's the most important part of what I do, is giving the developers a path to getting things done. I don't only say this needs to be fixed. I'm like, here's a problem, this is why it's a problem, and this is how you could do it better. And I think that's the most important thing if you want to get into the security audit space, because word of mouth still makes a huge difference in this industry. People will talk about the fact that, hey, look, you know what, I had an audit done and it introduced 2 weeks worth of work, but we way more confident in where we are now compared to, not knowing beforehand. As opposed to, just doing the bare minimum and just tossing a PDF across the wall, nothing gets done. And unfortunately, I've seen this, and this is not, me trying to berate any of your viewers. It's just, I find that a lot of people in the security industry don't go that extra mile towards being part of the development team if you're going to be doing an audit, right? And I'm specifically speaking about code audits and, the actual infrastructure and the applications. I'm not talking about network audits and this sort of stuff. As far as it's concerned with e-commerce, that's a responsibility of your host. I'm not talking about PCI compliance audits because that's highly regulated. And if we're talking about compliance, that's a completely different story. I'm not qualified to be doing compliance audits at all. I have my thoughts about PCI compliance, but it's not something you need you need a security auditor to take you through. Like that should be your baseline. PCI compliance should be your baseline, right?
How do you explain vulnerabilities and other security issues to the client?
It's hard sometimes to just explain the risk involved with. There is money on the table here, and not because our frameworks or our processes have done such a good job for you up to now means that something is not going to show up tomorrow and seriously affect your ability to make income. So yeah, if somebody has like, the smallest thing in a PCI compliance report that needs to be fixed, I would recommend fixing it, because as far as I'm concerned, PCI compliance is a baseline. PCI compliance does not guarantee you many things that you should be doing. You should be going above and beyond PCI.
Could you please explain for the audience what PCI compliance is so that they can understand better, and what payment card means?
So in case anyone doesn't know, PCI compliance is the regulatory compliance by the credit card payment card. So basically Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Diners Club, they have a bunch of, they have a compliance framework for if you're going to be taking payments online, you need to be compliant at various levels. It depends on how much money you're making online per year. So it's a big industry, and there's a lot of rabbit holes to go down in it. Hence, I don't do PCI compliance. I'm not very much of a box checker when it comes to security. I'm much more hands-on, which you could probably tell. I'm like, I want Jira access, and I want your devs. I want to see your devs be marking things as, in progress. I literally reached out to my client a week ago and said, look, you know what? I see everything still hasn't started. Like, what's happening? Are we writing this code? Are we fixing this stuff or not? So yeah, part of it is being that person. Part of it is being that advocate. And when you are that person and you're unafraid to advocate for security, there's a greater chance that things will get done. It's probably a flaw in human thinking. If somebody seems really passionate about something, you'll be like, well, maybe they're onto something. They may not be onto something, but you'll believe it because they're passionate about it. When I was convincing e-commerce companies to not focus on the absolute nitty-gritty tech, but first focus on their processes for securing stores, I was on stage and my slide said, if it's not documented, your process doesn't exist. And that's one of the big things I have. It's like, if it's not in Confluence, you don't have a process. Like if somebody's supposed to look at your logs every Monday morning to make sure nothing suspicious has been happening over the weekend with your e-commerce store, and it's not documented and it's not a recurring task for that lead dev, it doesn't exist. You don't have it because it's going to be forgotten. But there are tools that makes it simpler, makes it a little bit easier. But the thing is, what you're really looking for is like, am I seeing anything strange, or am I seeing referrers, or am I seeing big dumps going out, or people reaching out? One problem we've had, and this is a very old problem back in the earlier days of my framework, is the attackers would inject some remote code into the e-commerce store, and that code would read credit cards and write it to a JPEG file. It'll just be, B34.jpg, but it'll just be text, which is, JSON dumps of credit cards and all the information customers have filled in to the checkout form. And the thing is, the quickest way to find that would just be to open up the logs and search for B34, which is something I used to do on my audits. But something like that, having those patterns and knowing those patterns of where the attacks have come from, one is why you probably need somebody who knows what they're doing when it comes to audits. But two, it's why I want to form this sort of organization within e-commerce merchants and that have a framework for sharing information, because it'll help us all. And quick anecdote, if you didn't think this entire e-commerce security thing was not serious, a couple years ago, people actually were put in jail for this, for stealing credit cards online. There was they were caught and they were put in jail for this. I think it was. I'm not going to throw any country under the bus, but it was not in North America. Let's just say that. Yeah, yeah, but the thing is, like, it's yeah, but it's not anonymous people doing this. We've evolved the tools to be able to track them down and catch them.
Where did you learn to secure e-commerce? I mean, it's not like you can go to school for that. Where did you learn it?
Well, for me, because I've worked mostly in the open source side of things, it's very much I learned from communal knowledge, becoming a part of the community, and at least for me, and hold on, I'm forming my answers for you. I want this to be correct, because a lot of what I believe in is newcomers to an industry should have a good path to get in. And I think, okay, so there is big enterprise e-commerce, and there is open source e-commerce, which is also big enterprise. But with open source, you have an easier way to get in because you have access to a community. Open source brings a community there. Okay. And then there's SaaS e-commerce, which unfortunately there isn't too much to do there. Shopify does a great job, and they take care of it. You just gotta like move to Canada, find a job with Shopify. Yeah, you're breaking. Shoot me a message, I can reply you. Yeah. Well, technically, my accent's not Canadian. I don't really have an accent. I was born in the Caribbean, and I've been all around the world. So, yeah. But in any case, like, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like, if you want to get into the SaaS side of things, get a job at Shopify. Shopify is on fire, and they're always hiring. They've got great people doing security in their teams. I know a bunch of people there that do stuff, and they've got the best team. And there's a lot to learn from being part of a team, and a team that does that at the very forefront of e-commerce. Big enterprise, Salesforce and whatnot. I don't know too much about that industry, but one thing I could advise anyone starting off, if you're just a junior developer, you just come out of school, you want to get your feet wet, I would steer you towards open source communities, because the very nature of open source means that you're going to have people who are willing to help you learn. But more importantly, what you're going to have is an opportunity to contribute. And building something small, something tiny, anything you can to contribute to that community will open doors for you. And it will get you maybe access to more tools, maybe access to people who would be able to coach you. For me, I mean, I didn't even write anything fantastic. One of the biggest things I did for this community was, you mentioned incident response. I realized that a lot of companies, a lot of merchants who had no idea what to do if they were hacked, and they're just running around with, like chickens with their heads cut off, phoning me saying we need to get this fixed. I'm like, I can't. I have like 2 other clients. I can't fix your store right now. So what I did was I spent a couple weekends, and I absorbed all the information I could about incident response that was available online. And I just put out a plan. I'm like, here's a GitHub page with all the steps you need. Yeah. So if you go to github.com/Talesh/response, it's really easy. Um, it's just a plan. It's a plan. So you just follow it. You fill in the boxes. You practice it, and in the worst case scenario, something happens. You have a breach. Credit cards that start being siphoned off your site. You have some sort of framework to work within. And this is not something that's very difficult, but it was something that I created for my community. and it's been used by, large corporations, small companies, startup e-commerce companies. So if you want to get started, and this is not only e-commerce security, find the community and be part of the community. Give back where you can, and I believe open source communities will return in kind.
Oh yeah, they do. So I've put that up, that URL beneath you on the screen,
Yep.
but I want to say it again just for people that are listening. So github.com/Talesh. So that's TALESH/response, as in incident
Yep.
response. Awesome. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
We're giving away a mini course, and my student said to me today, Tanya, we want to add some extra. We want to add some extra links that aren't just things you made. What should we add? Ding, 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 ding. The universe has talked to me of what I'm going to include. So thank you so very much. That was brilliant.
I mean, mind you, this is very focused to e-commerce, but the thing is, in my opinion, doing something like this, being part of a community, contributing where you can, will open the doors, will get you the experience, will put you in touch with other people who are smarter than you, who have more experience than you, because that's what happened when I created this and a couple of my other stuff that I put onto GitHub. I had people who had way more experience than me, doing much more intense work than me, come back to my repositories to contribute because they saw a community endeavor taking place. And I was able to connect to them and learn from them.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so that's my pitch. Like, find an open source community that you're involved in, and just get involved in it. Like, if you're into networks, there's pfSense, which I think is open source, and there's various open source routers that you could be part of that community that's building stuff.
Cool.
And contribute where you can. It'll be amazing.
This is great advice. Listen to Talesh. This is excellent advice.
I mean, it's worked for me. So
I have one question left because that's all we have time for. Then I'm going to wrap up. So it's very difficult question.
Sure.
What is your favorite part about working in security for e-commerce?
Oh boy, this is.
I told you that it was a hard question. Very difficult.
How about this? I'll try to answer succinctly as I can. It's my belief that everyone who works in InfoSec, in security, does so from an empathetic point of view where they want to use their skills to care for others. Yes, it might be a lucrative industry to get into, but you have to be driven to have that protector nature. And for me, the best part of it is this e-commerce community, which I've grown up with, to be able to give back in that sense to them. Yes, my rate's a little bit high, but that getting that sense that, okay, there is another store which is not vulnerable to the things that we've seen running around the internet, gives me a sense of satisfaction in what I do.
That's awesome. I feel the same way. And the fact that there's always a cool new problem. With AppSec, there's always a cool new problem.
Always a cool new problem.
You're never going to be like, you know what, I'm just totally bored because my industry never changes. That is not a thing that's going to happen to you. Definitely not.
Tonight I'm going to have to go look about that new header you mentioned for regarding, security,
expect
encryption.
CT. Expect CT. Yeah, I'm just going to put it on the screen. So it's expect-CT. It's in my book. It's totally in my book. If you read here, I also killed a security header with that book. So the X-XSS-protection header, that's dead. I put some stuff on Twitter about it, but basically all the security experts agree that it causes more harm than good officially, unfortunately. It's really sad.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's a backwards compatibility thing. But anyway, I will talk about security headers all day, and I have to stop myself because I am not giving training right now. So
Okay.
thank you so much.
I have a question for you.
Oh, you have a question for me?
Yeah, if this pandemic ever eases up and I take a ferry across to the island, will you sign a copy of your book for me if I purchase one?
Oh my gosh, yes. So he's on the mainland and I'm on the island, for people that are wondering. So he's in Vancouver and I'm on Vancouver Island, and it's actually like 100 kilometers apart. It's not like we're right next to each other. You can't take a kayak.
Yep.
I have had my family tell me not to try. I crossed the Ottawa River in my kayak and got like shipwrecked in Ontario this one time, and then they're just always worried about me. But yeah, absolutely, that would be awesome. And once COVID is over, it would be so amazing to have you speak at the OWASP chapter, because we booted up an OWASP chapter here on the island, but then when we were about to have our first meeting was right when COVID happened. So then now we're sort of winding, we're just like chilling basically right now. We mostly all attend the awesome Vancouver OWASP chapter meetups because those guys are great. But yes, I would love to. And then we could do all the other Canadian things. That's what, so people will be like, oh, they're going to chase polar bears and they're going to eat poutine and they're going to build an igloo and we're going to do that stuff. That would be amazing. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Talesh. Thank you.
It's been my honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Okay, let's do the wave, and then we are going to disappear. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for the We Hack Purple podcast today. This was Talesh Seeparsan, and we talked all about e-commerce. We talked all about basically that it's very important that you actually action the results of your PCI compliance audit. Our sponsor today was ThreadFix, and they're powered by Denim Group. They're absolutely excellent. You should check them out. We Hack Purple has an academy, which we want you to check out, but we want you to have a preview for free. So please sign up for our newsletter so that you can take some of the free mini courses. And to sign up, you go to newsletter.wehackpurple.com. I'm Tanya, Janca, your host, and I hope to see you next week. Also, please click the thumbs up and leave us a review. Bye.